Bubbles said I should write a book. I have as many as 19 books on the shelves bearing my name. I never read one of them, and I never wrote one of them. But Bubbles says she doesn't believe in ghosts, and she said, Pep, you're such a wonderful, such a talented, such an intelligent man. Write it yourself. Don't let somebody else shape your thoughts, shape your words. Write it. Well, I'm not going to argue with Bubbles. Nobody argues with Bubbles, and I've sat down at the computer and I've written a little bit. And I would like to share the beginning of my book with you. It's nearly spring here, a time of rebirth and of new beginnings. And as I walk down along the river, I realize that I too am reborn. Bubbles McAdoo is clearly, without a doubt, the midwife of pep talk. For her love brought me back from the abyss of alcoholism that I had stumbled into when Ann Coulter seduced and abandoned me as she had done to so many other good men. I wanted to be alone. I wanted to fade away. But it didn't suit Bubbles McAdoo, the jolly socialite from the Hudson Valley, once referred to as the Doris Duke of Dutchess County. Bubbles didn't waste a moment when she heard what Coulter had done. Instead, she sent her chauffeur, Othello, to bring me back to her estate up the river. For the next 6 days, Othello was my constant companion in charge of a regime of physical exercise that can only be described by one word: torture. At the end of this time, Othello led me into the great lady's presence. "You look great, Pep," she said. But inside, I was an agonizing miasma of fear and self-hate. That's when I felt Bubbles' hand squeezing mine. Bubbles had always been a big fan of mine. In fact, Bubbles told me in her own staunch Republican family, most of the people were big, big fans of Rush Limbaugh. And I can see why the fat man put on a hell of a show back then. Not Bubbles. She fell in love. And when a woman like Bubbles McAdoo falls in love with something, be it a puppy or a kitten or an idea or a man, no force in this world is going to keep her from getting what she wants. She's a real blue blood. Her ancestry goes all the way back to Pocahontas. What a wonderful woman. What a wonderful woman. She's $2 billion worth of love. That's a lot of woman. When Bubbles hears a friend's in trouble, the first thing she does is reach for her checkbook and say, how many zeros? But there's only so much you can ask of Bubbles, or else you're just going to hurt her feelings. And I've always made my points with Bubbles by saying, honey, I love you for who you are, not how much money you got in the bank. In fact, I don't even know how much money you have in the bank. I don't think anybody knows how much money you have in the bank. There's so much money in the bank, nobody's ever bothered to count it. It's a lot of money, but that's not why I love you. In fact, the funny thing is, do you know that yesterday Bubbles was just thumbing through her portfolio and she pulled something together and said, Pep, I never knew I owned this company, Kraft. Have you ever heard of them? I said, Bones. They make all the macaroni and cheese. And she said, my God, I didn't know that. Should we give some to the poor people? I said, no, you don't want to give it to the poor people because then they would take it as an entitlement. But what we're going to do is give them coupons. That will be empowerment. That's what America's about, empowerment, to make them strive to rise to the top. This year they're all homeless, living under bridges, but God knows, with that kind of a push, next year they could be trailer trash. That's what America's about. I just have so much anxiety. It's really tough at times. I take it out on poor Bubbles, but she's a saint. She just looks at me and goes, poor Pep, you're a saint and a warrior and a poet. Hey, Bubbles, what's up? Yes, it is. By the way, hun, did you hear we got it for you? Carl called you our Mother of the Year. Yes, you're Mother of the Year, honey. You finally won something. Just leave it to old Pep. Bubbles really was beaming with gratitude when Karl Rove and I fixed the election and got her selected as Mother of the Year over that gay couple. A couple of neurosurgeons who had been greenhousing kids from the ghetto. It's a long story, but I get a phone call then, and it's her father. I love Ebenezer McAdoo. I just adore the man. Who wouldn't? He's the richest man in the world, and he treats me like a son. He said, you know, when I heard from Bubbles this morning that she had been elected Mother of the Year or was going to be elected Mother of the Year, I said, I wonder how they worked it. And I said, well, you know, basically Karl Rove paid him off. And he said, how much? And I told him how much. I'm not gonna make the sum public. And he said, Ma, you got that title cheap. He said, Pep, she's a wonderful girl. She's a wonderful girl, but as a mother, not much. Tomorrow morning, Bubs and I are getting on a plane. We are getting on a plane, and we are flying over to Scotland. We're not going to drive up from London. We don't have the time. We don't want to be away too long from the country we love so well, from the people who are so dear to us, because I'm going to get my title, and I am feeling great. I wish we could have done it a little bit. It's a Scottish title. It's an old Scottish title. It comes with a castle and extensive land holdings. It's the Laird of Dun Deal. You know, he was very impressed that the McAdoos would be the people purchasing his title because at least, he said, at least it keeps it in Scottish hands. Little did he know that Bubbles' ancestor had been a butcher's boy who had broken his apprenticeship in Glasgow, got on a packet steamer, and showed up in the United States just in time to enlist as a surgeon in the Civil War. They basically said to me, Pep, we're broke. You know, we could probably put together a very attractive deal, and there was Bubbles. You know, she felt like she had returned to her ancestral home, and she was wearing her little tam o' shan and her tweed coat and a scarf that designated, you know, her colors, the McAdoo colors, and her kilt, and Bubbles was sitting there, and she was so moved that poor Bubs was crying, and the first thing she did was she said, worthy gentlemen, worthy lords of Scotland, fear no more. And she pulled out her famous checkbook and pen, and she said, how many zeros? And with a swipe of a pen, Bubbles McAdoo had made Scotland solvent again, and they were throwing their bonnets up in the air and pulling out their claymore swords and drinking whiskey and shouting, hip, hip, hooray, for Bubbles McAdoo, Queen of Scotland. That's what they want to call her now, the Queen of Scotland. And the phone rang, and it was my good friend Sean Connery, and he said, oh my God, Pep, you are a laird of lairds. And the party went on, and we were having a good time. But meanwhile, I knew I was going to have to cut it short, and I said, Bubs, I just love my new title, and I love my new friends, and I love my new holding. I love these colors. I think they are very, very flattering to me. And you just look so wonderful. You look like the most beautiful woman on God's green earth. Here, back in your ancestral Scottish country, and so it was that an old love that had never died plucked a broken-down pundit off the scrap heap and set him back where he belonged. Such is the way of all things, they say, to be born, to pass away, and to be reborn again. They'll never know how right they were. And fans, friends, and Americans, fear not, the captain is back at his post. That's the beginning of my new book, Pep Talks. And I am going to lay on the line everything that I recall, everything that I can communicate to the people of America about my experience in American politics. I gotta